All right, Ian, we got a Patreon.
We do.
How do you access the CU Podcast Patreon?
You take your fingers and you type in patreon.com/CU Podcast. You go and you look at it. And we offer, well, I do a writing about once a week. We put up the full video podcast up there for Patreons. I do a chat once a month. So you can take a look at it and decide if you want to shell out some of those smackaroos.
Smackaroos. Jimmy Crack's toys. What was it? Jimmy Crack's toys and
Jimmy
games.
Applecrack, I think.
Jimmy Applecrack toys and games.
Jimmy Applecrack's toys and games.
Route 22 in Scotch Plains, next to Bowcraft. Anyway. All right, in third place on the Patreon poll, are the Marvel movies heading in the right direction, moving on from the A heroes to lesser-known heroes? Only 7%. Black Widow trailer just came out. It looks interesting. I'm going to see Black Widow. Second place at 28%. Ian's pet topic. What licensed property would you want adapted to a pinball machine? And in first place, Ian, this has almost made the podcast before, not as a poll topic. What were the early days of flea markets like for game collecting? Put on your old man hat, straw hat. Get your corn pipe.
So it was interesting. I remember I used to go when I first started buying games for the Nintendo actively. And let's just say I collected from 98 to 2008. Let's use that, I guess, as the time span. I don't remember when I sold off the majority of my collection at Too Many Games. We can say 15 years, I guess. 98 to 2012. I said it'd be 2013. Anyways, initially games were not like super easy to come by at the flea market. You would have the occasional booth, someone selling, their system that they had there along with their other stuff. But eventually, I would say probably around 2000, it became very easy to find games, at least at my local flea market. The Nintendo stuff at that point, I guess it would make sense, would have been probably well circulated out of used video game stores at that point in time. So it would need a new home, a new place to be sold and resold, and I think that's when a lot of these people started buying out perhaps lots of big Nintendo games, because all of a sudden I started seeing booths that would used to have a couple a few games would start having boxes and boxes of them. Namely, the one guy that I used to buy from all the time, he would just have stacks and stacks of boxes, and I don't know if he was getting them on closeout deals or what, but they were all over, and it was still looked at as kind of weird at that point in time to have interest in these games.
It's like 99-ish?
99, yeah. 99, 2000, 98, 99, 2000. That would be like someone having an extreme hard-on for the Xbox 360 or the PS3 right now. There are lots of people who love playing those systems. You can get a lot of games for cheap, but it's still, you don't see a lot of that. You see most people who are collecting are either buying for something a little bit older.
More than 2 generations back.
Yeah. Right now, I think GameCube, PS2, and Xbox are finally coming into their own. Certainly by next year. So I guess that would have been what Nintendo would have been about then, because we would have been PlayStation. We would have been one out from Super Nintendo. Either way, I don't think video game collecting was really a thing at that point. It just wasn't. It wasn't a hobby
for some people. But, I mean, video game collecting had been a thing, obviously, in the 90s for people that were more on the Atari, because that was 20 years ago.
But that's the interesting thing. I used to be able to buy the Nintendo games, even, like, rare ones, would top out at maybe $50.
Yes.
At that point in time, there were known rarities. There were known weird things.
Yeah, Funkoland had their newsletter.
The Panasian games were known to be, at that point, they were going for maybe 150, 200. If you could find them one.
Somewhere, yeah.
You could find them. A copy of Stadium Events at that point was $350 to $550. It was still worth something back then. It was known to be very rare, but we're not
that much in the late 90s.
I would say probably $350 at least. It was a few hundred.
Funkoland, I think you could still order it for like $1 if you could find it, or $5.
Well, that's the thing. No one could.
Yeah.
So I know it was worth a few hundred at the very least. But what was interesting about that point in time was, it was kind of cautionary too, because when I finally got there and was starting to buy this stuff, that's when the retailers that were selling games, the people at the flea market, were starting to put their Atari stuff out for next to nothing. And it took a lot less time, I guess, but you could see the value of Atari stuff going from something that used to be worth something to quickly becoming something that they just want to get rid of. But yeah, I mean so, and then as
What do you? Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off. At your height, what do you think? Like, did you ever see like a centipede cart for like $7, $8, $9?
I don't know that I ever saw Centipede at that.
Well, I mean, it's like a common Atari title that.
I would see some people trying to get $5 for some common Atari cartridges,
Gotcha.
$5, $6. But very quickly that stuff became universally $3. We don't want to price it. Here's a bin for $1. Here, take all of this for
It
15.
happened pretty quickly.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's mostly what I remember. By the time that, collecting of this stuff really became popular, like you say, in 2007?
Six, I would say 6.
2006, I had already more or less fallen off. I still bought games here and there, but I had stopped adding to my collection more or less by that point in time.
Okay. So I had about 3 or 4 flea markets I would go to in New Jersey. Meadowlands, which was decent. Englishtown, which was hit or miss because of the guy that with the store inside would always buy everything up at like 6 a.m. The one in South Jersey, Jesus Christ, God, the one down. I don't remember the names of these anymore. That one, and then there was a couple other ones I go to here and there. The one in Piscataway I went to. That was a nice one. On like a dirt little league field next to the firehouse. And those are the ones I go to. I go to like 4 or 5. I would go to at least one a week, sometimes 2 or 3. Sometimes you'd hit down the local one, and then you go to like Englishtown just for fun, and that's what you do. You make it a day. You go to 2 of them. It's like 5 hours of flea marketing fun. So I guess after I started collecting again, like 98, buying things here on eBay, I started going to flea markets. And then at the flea markets, you didn't, at least in 98, I don't think you had the guys yet, at least locally. You didn't have eBay sellers looking for sure. That didn't happen until the mid 2000s. That did not happen at all until like I want to say 2003 or 4. People started to really start doing the eBay thing and realize this stuff had some value to people. But it was like, yeah, you can go to Englishtown, and I think I probably talked about it before. Someone had a bag of 20 NES games, 25 NES games, and it was $20. That it's like $1 each. Just buy them all. At that point, it's like just buy them all because you're losing money, not just taking them all, and don't even care if you pick up doubles. I mean, that's what happened. That was still in the phase where I probably had 350 games or so in like the year 2000, something like that. So I started to buy doubles even not knowing I didn't have the list yet. I didn't carry. I printed out a list. This is before smartphones and having apps. So I was just buy it all because it's cheap. And then maybe you get lucky and you find something that's worth $10. Didn't get any rare ones that way, that's for sure, because most people did not have games like that. They'd have the Ghostbusters and have like TNC and things like that. And then so for me it was more like you would buy a bunch of games, and it got to the point where it was just hard to find ones that weren't common at a flea market. You'd still see the same 50 to 70 games, we'll just say 50 games,
sure,
that most kids had there. Like you'll still see a Kid Icarus, and you'll see maybe you'll see a Donkey Kong. It's like, whoa, it's a Donkey Kong. It's a little bit more uncommon there, and that's how it was. But then it got to the point a little bit later where, like I said, you started seeing more people you knew that were buying for eBay, and then the sellers there that would buy everything before, and then it got tougher. But that wasn't until early 2000s. That was like I said, like 2002 or 3 and 4. It's when it started to get harder to find stuff because there was more competition there. Indoor flea markets, I think, are a little bit different because those are more like stores. The indoor flea markets. There was the one on Route 7. Is it Route 17 off of Route 1, where they had the Route 17 flea market, where there was an indoor seller and he had hundreds of games. Probably like you had a guy, probably the same thing, and the stuff was priced. I mean, it was still kind of based off eBay, but it was a little bit looser because it's like 2004, 2003. Trying to remember, like. It was probably like you'd be shocked if a game was priced at like $10. You'd be like, oh, that's kind of expensive for a game, but most of it was like $2 or $3 each still for a game. $3 each, or maybe 4 for 10, if I remember correctly. But even at that point in time, I wasn't trying to get every single game. It was just get stuff that's interesting or cheap that's interesting.
Right.
At that point in time. So yeah, that's how it was. It was less competition, cheaper games. There was a lot of stuff that was out there, even though probably everything wasn't, because it's still in that phase where not everyone's aware that stuff is valuable. So there's still stuff that are still in people's closets nowadays. Almost probably none of the NES. Everyone knows that this stuff is probably worth money. So it's probably less and less this stuff comes out. Less and less of the Steam events, Yahoo auction stories that you see written up about. Oh, I have a Steam event. I'm sure it can happen. I'm sure it still does. I think a Steam event was found at a estate sale. Was that 2-3 years ago? 3 years ago it was found, but it's less and less as years go by, obviously, because people get rid of their stuff or sell it or throw it out, if that makes sense. So, I wonder how different. I wonder my experiences were from yours at the flea markets. Probably somewhat similar, I guess. Did you buy lots of games for like $20? Did you see that?
Yeah.
I mean, that still happened when I first moved here in 2009 and 10. I still got some weird deals like that where it's a garbage bag with like an NES and an N64 and like 15 N64 games and a bunch of NES games for like $50.
A $20 bill was the magic ticket.
That was it. Yeah. Yeah.
Flash a 20 at someone who's got a bag or a box of stuff that they don't want, and it's yours. That's how it was back then.
Until smartphones in 2012 when they started getting more popular. 2013, that's the cutoff. That was the magical cutoff when swap meets started being a little bit more work. And that's why, I was obsessed. I went every Saturday and Sunday when it came to San Diego for like the first 4 years almost. Not every Saturday and Sunday, but there was a lot. I was calling Ian, telling him the stuff I was finding, asking if he wanted stuff. Every fucking week I was calling you up.
Yep, it was crazy.
And you weren't telling me to screw off because that's when you were nicer to me. You had more patience then. All right, well, thanks for the Patreon question. Patreon.com/CUPodcast.